we're living in a day and age where essentially anything that's associated with a female and anything that's associated with a male is defined as either feminine or masculine. But that isn't what it means on the deeper rooted meaning. Like the definition on a deeper level is different than just associating it with man or woman. Uh, like the the idea is that like women will more naturally have a higher percentage of feminine traits, but like it's not unlike nature to provide a woman with a somewhat higher percentage of masculine traits or tendencies. So, like, and the same goes for men as well. Like, there are men with intensely masculine traits or tendencies, and also intensely feminine traits or tendencies. And so, like, this has very little to do with gender and more so to do with an association with what the vices are of one or the other, right? Um, like at the core, femininity gives way to a form of surrender. And at the core, masculinity gives way to a form of submission. So they're both somewhat on equal playing fields, but it's sort of staggered, right? Like one commits to a more or less complete surrender, and the other one commits to a more or less complete submission, right? But they want control over that, right? The masculine traits want control over what they submit to, and the feminine traits want control over what they surrender to, right? And so like this extends as far and farther than sexuality, right? Like like even in terms of the workplace or areas of expertise, knowledge based learning skills, like the heightened or lowered masculine or feminine traits tend to determine an outline of how we identify ourselves, right? And like it's just an outline, right? Like it's kind of like a coloring book, right? Like the picture in the coloring book is just the outline of the picture, right? But then you get to decide how you color it in, right? So, you might determine that, like, over the course of time, it has been established that you have more feminine traits, but you don't identify as a feminine person. You identify more strongly with the few masculine traits that you do inherently carry with you, right? And so, you can choose to exercise around that and change your paradigm. You can change from less masculine to more masculine, and from like less or more feminine to more or less feminine, right? And you can take it either way, like both on both sides, right? And like you can claim that this is because of testosterone and estrogen, but that's more partly compounds within the body that induce those sorts of traits, which is what separates us on a sexuality based level. Like it's it's very little to do with, like, in terms of features, yes. In terms of traits, not so much. Like, like, even a good example, it's not the exact same example, but a good example is steroid usage, right? Like, it will give a man more masculine features, but he might have like a mood swing and start crying over something, right? Like that's like what like happens under the effects of steroids, right? Is you get like these like violent mood swings, right? Like or it's a potential, it can happen. And so in that aspect, like I'm just saying that, masculinity is sort of thinly veiled as what it really is in today's day and age, and so is femininity. Like, both of them are thinly veiled. We're looking at both of them from a cartoon-like perspective. Even on the most intellectual levels, we're only describing masculinity and femininity on a very, like, you know we're we're talking about it as though we don't have any more understanding of it than children do, right? And like I use the term we very loosely, but at the same time, like it's the vast majority of the population that is just throwing around these masculine and feminine terminologies, and completely messing up the works, right? Like this has nothing to do with sexual freedom or sexual orientation, like in terms of the actual, like, just dynamics of the conversations going on surrounding masculinity and femininity. It's got more to do with it's more of a, fight over, like, who gets, like, ownership over the land. Like does the feminine or pro-feminine side of things get to, like, shift the landscape, or does the masculine or pro-masculine side get to adjust the landscape, right? And so like, seemingly, why would it matter, right? Like, there's a purpose for either set of traits, but inherently there's diversity among us, right? And so, like, that doesn't eliminate us from still going down a non-biased path, right? So, my answer to that is, there's a time and place for that. Like, there's a time and place for the masculine to rule, and there's a time and place for the feminine to rule. There's equal amounts of respect to be doled out for either end of the spectrum, right? Like, you don't want to eliminate the due diligence of at least the given respect of the other person, right? And so, when it gets to the point that you're just disrespecting them, like maybe start giving them credit for like, what they know, right? Like, it goes both ways, right? Like, I could say that for the masculine to the feminine, definitely, and I could say that from the feminine to the masculine. Like, if you, like, yeah, if it gets to be just disrespect between either side, then, like, why is it continuing that much, right? Like why can't you give the other side any credit, or why has both sides not backed away, right? Or like, why is there this attraction between the masculine and the feminine towards like conflict between the masculine and feminine? You know, there's an attraction towards a conflict between them. You know, like, it's ridiculous. You know, I know the answer. The answer is because, like, people aren't choosing the right partners. You know, like, I'm not saying that it has to be this partner or that partner, but I'm saying that, you know, like, it has to be the partner, right? It's not up to me to decide necessarily, right? Like the situation would vary for everybody, right? Like there would be situations where, you know, a group dynamic would like dictate like okay, like these people were meant to be together, right? But then there'd be other situations where, you know, like, you have to fight to be with that person, right? And then there's other situations where it might seem like that, at least externally, but realistically, if you go with that person, you're making the wrong life choices, right? You're going down a timeline that's going to lead to a treacherous end. And you know, like, this has to do with the dynamic, like the surrender and the submission dynamic, like between the feminine and the masculine, right? Like um you know, what the feminine aspects surrender to need to match with what the masculine counterpart is going to submit to, right? There needs to, like, the submission essentially needs to be a grounding tool for the surrender to be like a symbol of loyalty, somewhat, so to speak. Like, not 100% necessarily all the time, but like, it would be like this loyalty aspect through surrender. And the same idea would go with the submission. Like, it would be this submission out of loyalty, right? And so, you know, that's where it comes in with choosing the right life partner, is where your loyalties lie, right? Like, so, you know, yes and no, it has to do with masculine and feminine traits in a person, but that's not that's not necessarily the judgment call you want to call out upon them, right? Like you don't necessarily want to call out somebody for being too feminine, and you don't necessarily want to call somebody out for being too masculine. But if somebody's being too masculine or too feminine, like, how do you address that, right? Like, do you shame the person? Like, that seems to be the common thread in today's day and age, is that you shame the person early on for exhibiting traits that are unlike their identity, right? The idea behind that, though, is that, like, I'm more or less saying, like, why would there not be an alternative, right? Like, like, the alternative would seem to be, almost a litmus test vaccination hybrid. Like, you give them small doses of what they want out of it, until they eventually see for themselves whether or not they truly want it or not, right? Like, you kind of ease them into it, like, socially speaking, right? Like, so, or relationship wise, like those, that sort of aspect of it, like, so, then, if they are ashamed of it, they can accept that for themselves and, make changes where necessary. But like, the main focus behind what I'm saying is the surrender and the submission aspect, right? Like, and that it's attached to a sense of loyalty, and you know it, it's very connected with, that which we hold dear. Like, loyalty is very connected to that which we hold dear, right? And so, it would make sense that it would be such a sensitive subject to approach, on kind of the political field, because you're dictating somebody's emotional and physical response, which is allowable, based on, like, what they hold dear, right? And so, like, that's why, you know, diversity and inclusivity are are good, catalysts for better interactions with with like everybody in general, right? Like if everybody plays along with that game, then everybody gets along, right? Like whereas like on the other side of the aisle, like there's kind of like this like jiving and sneering and shaming of the other mindsets, right? Like it's very little evidence of what anybody's doing, right? It's very little evidence of you know there's very little evidence of what they're being shamed of, right? It's just a lot of conjectures based on like really blatant assumptions or even accusations of like hyper masculine or hyper feminine types of individuals, right? And so I'm not calling names here. I'm just saying like there's like the inclusive side and there's the less inclusive side. And one is doing more of the name calling than the other, right? And like that type of reason is why I'm making a video like this. Like, and also maybe like while I'm at the tail end of the video here, I'll make a small note on like the incels, like involuntary celibates. It really seems as though people are defining this as a masculinity crisis, right? As though there are no feminine types that are attracted to feminine types. And also like to indicate that like these incels are indeed feminine types. But like at the same time, like there are there are stronger feminine traits in many masculinized men that women are seemingly attracted to rather than these incels. But like just upon comparing notes about what's said about this like vaguely descriptive issue surrounding incels and like what like people who successfully have sexual partners, it really seems like these successful types like actually don't know what they're doing. They're like they'd be doing better off if they were doing the same as the incels. Like I think there's a reason that they would not have changed by now. Like I don't think that it's like just some sort of unfortunate genetic malfunction. And I don't think that it's, like, I don't think it's an inability to change who they are. Like, I think it's, like, honestly, like, that's what they've decided. Like, it really seems less involuntary than the label, like, suggests, right? Like, it, it's one of those things that I would lump in with the shaming, like, it's, I might even call it straight shaming, like, of all things. Like, there's gay shaming, there's slut shaming, and there's, like, there could be straight shaming as well, right? And that could be these incels are actually victims of straight shaming. You know, to try to, like, force like a gay type agenda, like, and so, like, the gay agenda wouldn't necessarily have to do with gay people, but there would have to be a group of people essentially trying to do the reverse of the pray the gay away, and instead they'd be trying to shame instill the gay into you, like, and so, like, it it really sounds that way, like if I'm getting into it, like, at all, like, it just, that's mostly what it breaks down to me, is like, it's a level of abuse. It's actually a level of sexually, like, sexual harassment, like, um it, just in general, like, I'd say that the people that would say and, generally carry out most successfully that they have sex, like, um they don't actually know what they're doing. They only think they're having a great time. Like, it's really, it's not about, like, being so much work, or it's not about being, like, like, it's not tiring. It's not like it's just a suggestion you're making to yourself, like, that you're a healthier person because of it, right? Like, and it's just not the truth, right? Like, it's, um it's, it, like, okay, like, here's how I break it down in terms of sexuality, right? Like, the like, if you're taking any role, like, traditional straight, or like gay, if you take either end of the spectrum, right? What does it break down to? There's an insertion and there's a back and forth until there is a climax, and then the back and forth stops. Like, it's actually rather boring. It's kind of like every, actually, like, it's beyond boring. It's almost more annoying. It's like every, day on some sort of part of the hours of the day, all of a sudden this kicks in and you're like, oh, I want this now, right? Like, why? Like, why would you, like, so just like learn to shut that off, like, instead, so like these incels, so to speak, like, they're just saving time, right? Like, there's very little to do with any amount of actual enjoyment being derived from sexual activity. It's just a waste of energy. Like, that's all it equals out to. It doesn't, it's a complete depletion of resources. Like, to alter your life around sex is a complete depletion of resources, and like, I'm not going to be dragged down with that. So, like, this is my little PSA on the masculine and the feminine. If you enjoyed this video, please hit a thumbs up, subscribe, leave a comment, and share the channel.